We are joined now by our guy, Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Mitch, how are you this morning?
I'm well. How are you guys?
Oh, I'm good. My two cohorts here were living their best lives about 10 minutes ago at my expense. So that's always pretty fun.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
No, it's okay. I think I'll be all right, Mitch.
I mean, don't go start playing the victim like Deion over here, all right?
Mitch was one of those guys that that I kind of happily jogged past to get to the booth on Saturday. He was actually working. I was coming off an emotional high, Mitch. So I was.
Was I working? That's.
It seemed like you were taking it all in. I mean, how about that environment? And did you get why Deion walked all the way around to come in front of where you guys were to go back down to the other end?
Doesn't he do that? I think he comes out on the field and does a lap. Some coaches do that. They like to stretch the legs. I think that's what he was doing. Because I looked up at one point and he was coming like straight for me, looked to my left, and I felt like if I hadn't moved, there might have been a collision. Because he was running.
He was coming right down the line. I'm like, Are we supposed to move?
Yeah, I didn't see him until he was about 5 feet away from me. So I took a quick step back and he ran right on the white of the end zone and made a hard left. And then I think five or so minutes later, he was back over there in an embrace with Bud Crawford. So yeah, it was quite a scene down there. A lot of star power for sure. And just the electricity in the air, the students being in their seats 90 minutes before kickoff. That place was full. It was full of juice.
Been a long time since I heard the student section utter expletives.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about that, and it certainly happened in 14 for the Miami game. That may have been the last time.
Mitch,
that may have been the first time.
Yeah, it was going on for so who stopped him, or did they just think like, oh, we can actually be heard? This is really loud.
Well, Travis Hunter came over and danced for him.
Yeah, he did. I like Travis Hunter, and I always since the giraffe pajamas and the Pikachu, like I've always liked Travis Hunter.
And if you didn't before this week, how could you not? If you're a Nebraska person and you heard what he had to say about the environment and the stadium and Nebraska as a team.
He said, I couldn't even think.
Yeah, I kind of, I did. You're right, Mitch. I wasn't a huge fan until his comments about Nebraska, but I think I realized I was just holding him like guilty by association.
No, you hated him because you made fun of me for liking the onesie.
No, I kind of hated him because he chose to hang out with Deion, if I'm being honest. I'm like, anybody who chooses to hang out with Deion that much, I don't know if I can roll with him. But he seems a little bit more, he seems to have more sense than his head coach, which I appreciate.
Look at the kind of player that he's trying to be at the next level. Who better to model yourself after than?
I mean, you could have gone to Florida State, but that'd have been fine.
Let me ask you something, Mitch, because you are super practical. When you watch what's going on in Boulder, and obviously Shadur and Shiloh will be leaving, will Deion be held in a more favorable or less favorable light for other coaching or potential options?
Okay. I thought you were going to ask if he was going to be held in a more favorable or less favorable light at Colorado. And I was saying that's pretty presumptuous of you.
I was going to say, we're making a big assumption there.
Well,
Oh, in the right situation, I mean, clearly he has a lot to add and has great football knowledge, and he's a motivator.
Does he?
I was gonna say I might push back on the football knowledge part. Like maybe he doesn't impart it well. I don't look at his teams as like that guy knows what he's doing or knows what he's talking about.
Well,
like,
I didn't say that he has great knowledge about running a program.
Oh, fair.
I'm saying he has great football knowledge, like on the field. I think he can diagnose what's happening at a high level. Otherwise, was it just entirely his great athleticism that allowed him to be the player that he was? I think that's selling him short. I mean, he was the Travis Hunter of his day. He was a great worker. I mean, and he was playing Major League Baseball, and so I mean, I think he's wise in the ways of the sport of football, as far as overseeing a program and getting everyone to operate on the same page. No, that's not what's going on in Boulder. So I don't know. Yeah, I think it's going to hurt his ability when his days are done there. I think it's going to hurt his ability if he were to say want to go run a program in the SEC, or a year ago at this time when Colorado was the talk of college football for reasons not like Deion is today, because it shocked the world when it beat TCU and then put a hurt on Nebraska and won an insane game against Colorado State. Which is coming up here this week again. Somebody else who wants to get over on Colorado in much the same way that Nebraska wanted to this last week is Jay Norvell and his guys in Fort Collins. Last year at this time, the conversation was, okay, when he leaves, is he going to go to the SEC or the NFL? And that's very much not the conversation now. Now it's like, will he continue to coach, or is he just going to go try to get a position at the NFL organization where Shedeur lands?
Mitch, is it, if I were to try and give Deion the benefit of the doubt here, which I know I don't do very often, so it's hard for me, but
at least you're honest.
Could I make an argument that it's actually going to be easier for him when he's not trying to coach players that he is so emotionally attached to?
That is hard.
Is he going to care as much? Is he going to want to do it? Is the question that I have. Would he want to do this if Shedeur and Shiloh and Travis Hunter weren't there? I'm not sure, because he coached when he was younger and he was getting started in coaching coming out of the NFL in Texas, and I think there were times where he wasn't coaching his kids, at least at some of the work he was doing. But I don't know.
He got into coaching originally because kids weren't being coached right. Right? Like,
it's ironic.
That's it.
It is pretty ironic.
I'm not making.
I know you're right. I remember that. Yeah.
So expound on that a little bit, Mitch, because it does, and I think that's what drives Ravi crazy, other people crazy. It seems like what we see is so contradictory to what we hear.
Yeah, I it's ego driven, and he wants to. Somebody this week made the comment that he is he's the personal coach for a select few on the Colorado team, and that is his priority more so than being the head coach at Colorado. And I don't know if it's I'm guilty here of spreading that. But I'm really just repeating what I heard, and I know that doesn't matter. I said it. I don't know if that's fair to him, but whatever. That's the narrative right now. Like, that's what it looks like. I think he's brought that on himself. Whether that's the case or not, and whether he cares about the progress in the future, in the ability to learn of his middle linebacker or his running back. I don't know. Without being there inside, I honestly don't know. But that's not what it looks like when you pass by once a year.
Mitch, let me ask you about how you kind of think this game looks for Nebraska in sort of the grand scheme of things, because I think a lot of us look at Colorado and go, hey, that's probably not going to end up being a very good football team. Like, best case scenario, they make a bowl game.
You still had to win it.
Right. And that's kind of the juxtaposition, right? Is, hey, this is not a great football team, but it was a big game in a big moment, and Nebraska's failed there a lot against both good and bad football teams. Like, how do you kind of weigh how you think this impacts Nebraska long term within the context of who Colorado likely is?
Yeah, you got to crawl before you can walk, and Nebraska needed to jump that. Nebraska needed to get up off the ground and win that game. I mean, there will be bigger challenges ahead for sure for this program. Matt Rule knows that. His players, I think, understand that now. But you don't just go straight to Ohio State. And in fact, there's some steps along the way between Colorado and Ohio State. There's several levels that you have to jump up before you're ready to go and compete on the big stage in the conference that Nebraska's in. So, that was an important one to win. If not so much because of the opponent and what Colorado presented, because of the moment that it was, and because of the attention and the spotlight. Nebraska's failed in those moments a lot in recent years, I think in part just because of the gravity of the whole thing, the weight of it. And I'm not so sure that you saw it's 28-0 at halftime. It's like this was a laugher. There's some scenarios in you plug in some different variables in that game, and I think it looks a lot different, even with Colorado being as rattled and as affected by the environment as it was. Like the
Third down
Nebraska coaches, sure. Nebraska coaches and of specific players, like Nebraska coaches have spent a lot of time this week singing the praises of Dylan Raiola and talking about how the rest of the offense needs to match his intensity. And, I think about how would that game have looked if Nebraska just had average or below average quarterback play, and it would have looked a lot different because it wouldn't have been 28-0 at halftime. It might have been 17-7. It might have been 14-7, something like that. You commit a turnover, you can't execute the 2-minute drill. Another mistake here or there, and 28-0 looks a lot different. And if that's the case, we've seen games like that where Nebraska is clearly the better team, doesn't fully take advantage of that. And in the second half, things start to go wrong. And here you are again at the end of the game, and it's within one score, and Nebraska comes out on the wrong side. This game wasn't all that much different from being like that, but it had a difference-making player in the right spot.
Now you're talking to a guy that was benched for being ill-prepared coming off of a big week previous. So I didn't embrace the old preparation thing heading into the next one. How important is it, or is this sort of referendum is way too hard, but maybe a little bit of a litmus test for Coach Rule and his ability to get them dialed back in based on how candid his press conference was on Monday. That didn't sound like a lot of coach speak to me.
No, he got dealt. Of course, he would have wanted to win that game 42-7. That would have been more enjoyable coming off the field on Saturday night. It was still enjoyable. He was, as he said, he was fired up, but you would have felt better if you won the game the way that he thought they could. And he said it multiple times. He thought they could have won that game by 30 points or something in that neighborhood. It wouldn't have left him with the same kind of ability to get his players' attention this week if that had been the case. So it's kind of a win-win for him in that you win the game, you're 2-0, and you can fully address your team and get your points across, and they're going to feel it. They're not, oh, hey coach, look, we won by 5 touchdowns. Like, let's lay off. And that could lead to a letdown. I don't think so at all. I think the offense feels an urgency to step it up and to go out and block on the perimeter, to win battles down the field as receivers, to get open, to run. I'm talking only about the receivers, but it's all over the field. The offensive line, I think, is going to feel some urgency in this game. It's not that Nebraska wants to make a statement or send a message this Saturday night in the same way that it did last week, but in that's still there. That's I think going to be a big focus for Nebraska going into this game is let's show who we really are as a team, because I don't think people saw that for 60 minutes last week.
We're talking with Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Mitch, as a lot of the conversations have been about the offense and either how it didn't look in the second half or how it did look in the first half. But I'd like to kind of talk about the defense here for a second, because if you look at this Colorado team, for whatever flaws it has, it can be super explosive offensively. We saw that last year. The only games that it really struggled offensively for the most part were against pretty high-level opponents. How did that game make you feel about the defense versus how you maybe thought either before the season or coming into week 2?
Yeah, I don't feel a whole lot different about the defense. I thought highly of the defense before the Colorado game, and they confirmed some thoughts about what they're going to be able to do when they want to get after a quarterback. Nebraska didn't make Colorado one-dimensional. Colorado was one-dimensional on its own with what its offense presented. There's just not the threat of a real run game there. So a lot of times you've got to turn a team into a one-dimensional system, and that was just there from the beginning. Colorado couldn't run the ball in the first possession of the game, so they kind of made Nebraska's work in that sense easy. And Nebraska did more than just the same as last year with Hurrdat Sanders. Nebraska got home on the pressures. A lot of times last year, I thought Nebraska put pressure on the quarterback and didn't necessarily get home as often as it would like to. In 2 games against Colorado, it's gotten home a lot. So I think they're going to be able to continue to do that. So my thought about the defense is on the defensive line, they've taken some steps, some important steps in adding size, in getting in better shape, in building even more depth, and they're going to be able to do what you saw, dominate some teams up front consistently. Like it's a very good defensive line. And then I think Nebraska can hang its hat on stopping the run. That hasn't been challenged much in that area through 2 games because the 2 opponents who've come in haven't tried to run the ball. That's going to change this week, and it's really going to change in the Big Ten. So I'm bullish on the Nebraska defense because I think they can do everything well. I think they can. Their signature will be stopping the run, and they look to me like this year they're going to be better at putting pressure on the quarterback.
So, Mitch, when you're taking a look at, because I want to be careful here, and so I love to like set the tone early so we can't go back and say whatever. So a couple of things here in the last 10 minutes. You said we were talking about, hey, Nebraska relative to how Colorado ends up. Hey, Nebraska playing well relative to their lack of success in the past. Let me take it one step further when we get into the totality of Nebraska's evaluation. How careful do we need to be that we don't change our expectation levels based on what the Big Ten Conference turns out to be? Because so far, it's vastly different in a multitude of ways than we thought in the preseason. I just don't want us to be allowed to go back and say, well, yeah, but like I like consistency going forward.
Yeah, there's some things in the Big Ten that look different than what we thought going in, but I don't think it's dramatically different for Nebraska and what's on Nebraska's schedule. Oregon is the biggest, I think. The team that needs to be most reconsidered because of how it's struggled to win 2 games. Still 2-0, but it hasn't looked like the team that's like the 3rd or 4th best team in the country in doing it. Well, Nebraska doesn't play Oregon this year. So, there's other teams out there that look better than what we expected. And I'd put USC at the top of that list. Nebraska plays USC this year. So I don't think there's any reason to reevaluate. I mean, you can split hairs on Iowa and Wisconsin, but they weren't expected to be juggernauts. At least I didn't think that. I mean, people talked about Iowa in the playoff conversation. That may still come to pass. Probably not after losing, the margin for error for teams like Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin is slim. And if you lose a game in September, that's, to a non-conference opponent, that's not going to bode well for your resume to be one of the 12 standing at the end. So, okay, Iowa is a step below where we thought the Hawks would be right now, but that's still an extremely difficult game for Nebraska on Friday night in November. I haven't seen evidence to this point, despite the Big Ten looking different than what we thought it was going to look like in July. I haven't seen evidence to this point at all that makes me reassess what my expectation is for Nebraska in the league.
Mitch, is there anything in your mind that moves the needle with Nebraska re-entering the rankings? I mean, I know it's a kind of just a measure of progress from where this program has been, so it matters in that sense. But I guess on what scale does that type of thing matter?
I think it matters just in creating exposure nationally. And like Nebraska has become like overnight, and I wrote about this today on The Athletic, like overnight, this team that's awake again in college football. And people want to buy in, and I think it's why the voters who determine the rankings are like eager to put Nebraska in the polls. Like when you get to that, filling out those final 5 to 7 lines as you make your poll on Sundays or Saturday nights, like Nebraska enters your mind in like almost kind of an emotional response, because it's like, oh, this is you romanticize like this is Nebraska. Like look at that stadium. Look at the how much fun that looked like, and the defense is flying around. I mean, they deserve to be ranked. Like they looked like a ranked team, certainly for the first half of that game on Saturday. But some of it is because it's who Nebraska is. So that matters. Like that perception matters. It matters in recruiting. It matters in just building this thing the way that Matt Rule wants to build it, and creating like an aura around the program. Like they're going to run out of the tunnel on Saturday night, and they're going to have more swag than they've had in the past in situations like this. Like you've played a week 3 game against an FCS opponent, it might be viewed as a snooze fest in some other situations, but no, now it's like you're the number 23 team in the country. You've got this freshman quarterback that everybody's talking about. Like there's eyes on you nationally that weren't there in other situations like this. So the national ranking, I think it plays into that entire conversation.
Mitch, let me get you out of here on this. If you're let's go rapid fire so I can take advantage of the 60 seconds. If you feel good, the same, or if you're this particular team's head coach going forward. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Oregon.
I don't feel as good. I feel worse than I would have.
Iowa.
If I'm Iowa's coach, I feel worse. I think Kirk Ferentz feels the same.
Minnesota.
Ooh. The same.
Wisconsin.
I feel worse about Wisconsin going forward.
Michigan.
Worse, absolutely.
Ohio State.
The same.
Give you 2 toughies here. Rutgers.
I think I feel better.
Illinois.
I definitely feel better about Illinois.
Okay. It's weird, right? That's kind of setting the narrative for how we feel. Outside of Minnesota, we'll play those guys, right? It's like, or Michigan, but all right, Mitch. I like it. You're good with rapid fire. Not bad. Not bad.
Mitch, we appreciate the time as always. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Mitch.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.